Today we're jumping into a really compelling argument from the book series The Wars of Light and Darkness. We're going to break down chapter 17, which is called The Divine Mystery Oracles of the Teacher of Righteousness.
The source material kicks things off with this huge puzzle right from the Gospels. Picture this. Jesus tells his inner circle, his closest followers, exactly what's going to happen, that he's going to be executed and then rise from the dead. And what's their reaction? Total confusion. They just don't get it. So you have to wonder, right? Why were these words, which seem so crystal clear to us today, completely hidden from them? And that really sets up the central question of this whole chapter. I mean, Jesus kept insisting that the scriptures were all about him. But if that's true, if the prophecies were so clear, then why couldn't his own disciples, the people he chose himself, see it? What were they not seeing in the text that we now call the Old Testament? What was the missing piece?
Well, to even begin to answer that, we need to completely reset our understanding of what Scripture even was back in the first century. See, we think of the Bible as this one single book, but back then, not at all. The idea of an official, authorized Bible hadn't even been thought of. It was more like a library of different sacred scrolls floating around. And a lot of those texts that were later cut from the final version, were considered totally sacred. Think about the stuff found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. For some groups, that was prime-time reading.
So let's talk about the community at Qumran. These are the folks who gave us the Dead Sea Scrolls. They had this really unique way of reading scripture called Pesher. Basically, they believed that the ancient prophets wrote in code, in these deep mysteries they called Razim. And they believed that God had given the key to unlock those mysteries only to their leader, who could then apply those ancient secrets to what was happening right then and there.
And that leader, well, that's where this whole thing gets really interesting. He is the key figure in this entire puzzle. Okay, so according to the Wars of Light and Darkness, this leader was called the Teacher of Righteousness. And he wasn't just some random guy. He was seen as the legitimate high priest, a top-tier prophet, and this was all happening generations before Jesus. He was apparently persecuted by the establishment priests in Jerusalem, and his community, the Essenes, were convinced he personally wrote some of their most important holy texts.
Okay, so now we get to the part where your jaw might drop a little. The source material lays out some absolutely shocking parallels between what this teacher wrote about his own life and mission and what was later said about Jesus.
Get this. In his own writings, the teacher basically says, I am Isaiah's suffering servant. He calls himself the Herald of the Good News. He talks about being opposed by wicked priests in Jerusalem. And he sees himself as the chief cornerstone of a new spiritual temple. I mean, does any of that sound familiar? It should. These are the exact same titles and roles that the New Testament applies to Jesus.
And that brings us to what the chapter presents as its crown jewel, the most critical piece of evidence. It's a prophecy from a Dead Sea Scroll called the Melchizedek text. The argument here is that this was the script Jesus was following all along.
So this scroll, which, again, the book argues was written by the Teacher of Righteousness, lays out this idea of a Messiah figure who doesn't just show up once. Nope. His mission is split into two distinct parts, two separate advents or appearances.
The first advent, it's all about a humble messenger, an anointed of the Spirit, who comes to herald the good news. But, and this is crucial, this figure is destined to be cut off. Then there's the second advent. This time the same figure returns, but he's not so humble anymore. He comes back from the heights as a cosmic divine judge, an Elohim, to bring about God's final judgment and set up the forever kingdom.
So how does Jesus fit into this picture? Well, the Wars of Light and Darkness points us to that incredibly famous scene in the synagogue in Nazareth. Jesus gets up to read, and what scroll does he pick? Isaiah 61. And what's so special about that? It's the exact same prophecy that the Melchizedek scroll uses to describe the mission of the first advent, the humble messenger.
But here's the kicker. It's not about what he read, it's about what he didn't read. He stops, mid-sentence, right before the line that says, "And the day of vengeance of our God." He just leaves it hanging.
And boom, according to the source, that's the whole ballgame right there. By literally cutting that verse in half, Jesus was making a powerful statement. He was basically saying, I'm here to do part one, the Herald of Good News part. Part two, the day of vengeance, the judgment stuff, that's for later. That's for the second advent.
So we're left with this really provocative idea, right? The book proposes that the reason the disciples were so confused makes perfect sense if you realize Jesus wasn't reading from the script they knew, he was acting out a completely different one. A very specific playbook from his own Essene heritage. A playbook that his disciples just hadn't read.
Please like and subscribe. For more information or to purchase this full volume, please press on the link in the description.